isn't there a show called Pimp Out Your Ride or something where they jack up, they make the cars look amazing. And so the guy's idea was basically, it was like pimp out my pimp out my clock. But that was the idea, that was the spirit. So he actually did it for free, and he gave me this clock, and basically that he was hoping to do that, where like you basically get a clock with like really fancy designs on the back. So so anyway, so Emory plays e4 here. Now in this game, I think this was one of these times in my misguided youth that I chose to play the Ali Ekins defense. So I played knight f6 here, e5, knight d5, and now he played d4. I think this is my FIDE rating or USCF rating that I put in for this game. I don't know. Either way, you get d4. Now this was disappointing, so I'll tell you guys an old story. So around 2002 or 2003, I was informed, I was looking at the Ali Ekins defense, and I think this was my friend Jason Doss who brought this up, and he was talking about how there was this really cool line that Emory used to play, which is c4, knight b6, and now this amazing move a4. And after a5, Emory played this very inspired idea with rook a3. And the point behind rook a3 is to lift the rook. So say black plays something like g6, rook g3, bishop g7, d4. Even though the computer likes black's position here, white can play like h4, h5, and it gets very, very, very scary potentially with quick attacks on the g and the h files here. Of course, computer, when you use the engines, they refute this quite confidently, and black is just much better. But I do remember him playing this line. I actually played this quite a bit on the Internet Chess Club around 2002, 2003 in many games. So people who look through that old games database will definitely find games where I played this. So this is one line that was very, very interesting. Of course, computers have proven that it's just not okay, but it's something fun. At any rate, Emory did not play that. Emory plays d4. Now I play d6 here, plays f4, and now I go knight b6, and Emory played knight c3 here. Those of you who have been watching my streams in recent times probably will notice that c4 is what we call the 4 pawns attack in the Ali Ekins defense. I actually had this in Title Tuesday, that stupid game that I lost to David Provian, I believe last round Title Tuesday about 3 weeks ago, where he played the setup against me. So it's all pretty known. Anyway, Emory plays knight c3, a little bit different here. Now I take an Emory, very untrue to his form here, played d takes e5, which is not the move of a top G. Here Emory takes with d pawn, offering a queen trade. Now maybe because I had beaten Emory a couple times, he wasn't so sure of himself, but he takes with the pawn. Now, everybody will remember Emory as an amazing attacking aggressive player, so it's very surprising that in this game he chose to take with the d pawn, but he did. So he decided to take with the d pawn. So now we trade on d1, and I play knight 6. Very boring position, by the way. Knight e3. Now here I played g5 again. At this point in time, Emory had been slowly declining. Obviously, as you can tell from the ratings of each game, I had improved quite a bit, so I felt like I had to win this game with black. So I go g5 to really try and spice things up. So here Emory plays a4, which is actually a mistake, although how did I not win this game? This is such a bad mistake, because it goes from 0s to minus 1.3. I mean, the computer says takes, I think, knight e5 and probably like bishop d2 castles, and it's just a game. But he played a4, so I took. He goes to a5. Now I took, he took, I took, he took. On here I played bishop g7, which apparently is still quite good for me, because he plays bishop b6. If I take the bishop, then he wins the rook on a8. So now I go bishop takes e5. He goes c3. Now I play bishop to d7 here. Emory goes knight f3. And actually the interesting thing here that I'm realizing is that the problem after bishop g7 is that now white's getting a lot of activity very, very quickly. So it's a little bit tricky to play. I'm not sure what exactly did I do wrong. I guess computer probably likes what, bishop f5 maybe, something like bishop f5 and some kind of aggressive development. I guess it's probably because the bishop is just more active, whereas in this game we get this position where I have a passive bishop versus being on f5. So I go bishop g7, bishop b5. Now I castle here. Emory plays bishop c5. I play a6. Now he goes bishop to a4 here. So now I play the move rook fc8. Emory castles, and the problem actually here is that I've got a lot of weaknesses. Like the pawns in the center are very weak. White actually has no weaknesses, and their ideas like knight g5 also long term to put pressure. So it's because of these pawns on f7 and e7, it's not trivial to prove the advantage of the extra pawn. So I do play e6 here. You get knight g5 being played. Now I go knight to e5, guarding f7, also offering a trade of bishops. Emory plays bishop d4, the best move. We trade. Now I go b5, plays rook a1. Now here I play rook c7, which apparently is wrong, although no, actually it's the best move. I'm not sure why I thought it was wrong. He goes knight e4, play knight d7 here. And now Emory trades on. He has knight d6. This is why. Okay, I'm looking at this game and I'm wondering like, okay, not to give away spoilers, but I'm like, what did I do wrong? So I play knight d7, which is clearly a mistake. Apparently I should just go a5 here, and I can go a4, knight c4. But by going knight d7 after trades and knight d6, there's a very nasty fork of the pawns on f7 and b5. And after knight f6, white has the move knight takes b5 here to attack the pawn, or to capture the pawn on b5. So that's the main thing here. Was saying something's not correct. What's not correct? Fix something. I think everything looks good. No, I mean, what doesn't look right? I'm confused. Everything looks right. No, I don't understand what doesn't look right. What doesn't look right? Oh, this doesn't look right. Oh, I see. Okay, there you go. There you go, you guys. Let me put it a little bit more correctly. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so anyway, so let's keep going. So after knight takes b5, I play rook to b7 here, knight to d, or sorry, not knight to d4. He plays c4. Apparently this is slightly wrong. He should play knight d6, but he goes c4. I play rook b8, guarding my rook on a8, but also forcing the knight to move after once I can capture the pawn on b2. Get knight to d6. Now I play rook a7, and here Emory plays knight to b5. Amazingly, the computer actually says that after rook f2 with the idea of stacking, white is significantly better here, about 0.6. So instead he plays knight b5. I go rook d7. He takes, and now I go knight to e4. Now here white is up a pawn, but of course due to the activity on the d file here, black should never really be in much danger. Also the knight on b5 is kind of stuck here. You can't really push the pawn or move the knight for that matter. So rook c1 is what Emory plays. Now I go rook d2 here, rook to e1, play knight c5, rook a7. I take the pawn, knight to d6, play rook d8, plays rook f7. If knight f7 here, for example, I can play rook d2, and after knight e5, I can go knight b7. And again, the position is pretty balanced. White probably has to go knight f3, rook g2, king h1, and after rook f2, a couple ways for white to play. Probably c5, c6 is the simplest draw. This game was, I believe, classical chess. This was in Sturbridge, Massachusetts. I believe this was a slow game. So he plays rook f7. I go king g6, rook to c7. I take, he takes. I play rook d2. And after rook e6, king f7, he plays rook c5. And here we agree to a draw, because if I check, he can obviously just block, and white's actually doing well. But I simply take, and after takes, he can just go check, 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 and check, check, check. And there's just no way out, because the rook on e5 prevents the advancement, and it guards the rook on e8, e7, e6. So this is the fourth game that we played. Now this game was a draw. Now there's one more game that we played, the fifth and final game between Emory and I. Now this is the game where there is a little bit of footage on YouTube, the 1 minute 18 clip, which we did watch it yesterday, you guys, but there were probably people who didn't see it, so I guess we'll show it very briefly. Let me find it. This is from the fifth and final game that we played in 2007 at the World Open. Quality is bad, obviously, but I'll play it anyway for those of you who have not seen it. $144p exactly, yeah, $144p. Also, those of you who are actually in the chess world, you'll probably notice that this is me against Emory. We were playing in the fast schedule here too. This is actually another very strong grandmaster, Leonard Udasin here, and the guy next to him is an IM from New York, Jay Bonin. So those of you who are in the chess world, you'll actually notice all three of them. Looking at Emory's hair, we now know why Andrew shaves his hair off. Oh my god. Wow. Wow, okay. No, actually, no, sorry, the guy on the left here is not Maurice Ashley. It is a grandmaster. This is actually this is a Filipino grandmaster, Mark Paragua, right here. This is another very strong player as well. So all these players are all these players. Yeah, this is Mark Paragua. He lives in New York. He's from the Philippines. He's also quite strong, like 2550 FIDE, I think at his peak. Anyway, let's keep going. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, this video is very short. Obviously, it's only a minute 18 seconds. But yeah, as you guys, also I want to point this out because this is one thing I think people don't realize is like, if you're not playing these super elite top level tournaments, these are all like, this is pretty standard. Like you'll see, you can kind of see it here, but like Bonin and Prague, we were playing on third board, like you got to bring your own set, you got to bring your own clock. It's bring your own everything when you play chess. Doesn't matter if you're like, it doesn't matter if you're a beginner or you're a GM, you just have to, you got to bring your own stuff. So that is like one of the things that like is very, very different, and you can tell like you just, if you don't have it, you have to go borrow it from somebody else. So it's kind of insane any way you look at it. Do you just bring your own chair? No, chairs are provided. As you guys can see, there are chairs everywhere in this little dungeon. I remember this very well actually, because this was down in the basement of like a hotel convention center. I forget what it was called. I think it was a convention center, but yeah, this was literally in the basement. This was literally in the basement. So yeah, US Chess Federation chairs are provided. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this was in the basement. I remember this very well. It's literally like you had to go, I think you had to go down an escalator. Maybe I'm thinking of a different one. Maybe that was a different year, but like you had, this was down in the basement. This was down in the basement for sure. So electricity is provided. Yeah, totally. But this was all the way back in 2007. And like I said, chess, everybody thinks it's like some super glamorous thing. This is a reality for most chess players. Like you go and you play in this big convention room, and it's like you got to bring your own board, own set. If you don't have one, you got to borrow one. I mean, I remember there were a couple times that like I think myself or my stepfather we would basically loan our set to somebody, to like one of the other GMs, like one of the European GMs who of course they didn't bring it, because like why would you? It's in Europe, you don't have to. And then like we would wait for our set. The problem is then they would play like a 6-hour game, so we'd have to get it like the next day, and so it's it was so kind of like random and weird. But yeah, gotta bring your own paper. I think actually score sheets, I think score sheets were provided, but I'm not actually sure on that. I'm not sure if score sheets were provided. But this was World Open 2007. This was one of the ones in Center City. Do I still have the board? I definitely have the clock, because the clock has my name engraved on the back. Do I have my clock somewhere? Sorry, I'm looking around. I don't see it. I definitely have the clock, because the clock, someone actually gave it to me. They engraved it. I remember they engraved the back of the clock. And I think the idea was they were hoping to do something like pimp out, you know how there's a show called Pimp Out Your Ride, right? Isn't there a show called Pimp Out Your Ride or something where they jack up, they make the cars look amazing? And so the guy's idea was basically, it was like pimp out my pimp out my clock. But that was the idea, that was the spirit. So he actually did it for free, and he gave me this clock, and basically that he was hoping to do that, where like you basically get a clock with like really fancy designs on the back. So anyway, yeah, it's a good reminder. I'll find the clock and I'll show it to you another day. I don't know where it is right off, and I'm not gonna like take 10 minutes rummaging through all my stuff to try and find it, but when I do find it, I'll show it to you guys like tomorrow or Wednesday on stream. So anyway, back to the chess. Let's keep going. Here we go. So we're gonna go back to the chess. This was the 5th and final game that I played against Emory in the great year of 2007. So the game starts with Emory playing knight f3. I played d5, plays d3. You want me to try and find the clock right now? You really do? Okay, give me a minute. No, I didn't find it. I realized actually, you know what the problem is? You know what the problem is? It's not here. It's actually at my house in New York. I realized that. I realized that. I'll have to talk to my your clock made it right. Yeah, it's on my shelf. No, it's not. No, it's I know where it is. I thought it was here, but it's not. It's literally in my room back in White Plains, New York. Anyway, all right, let's get back to the game. So let's get back to the game. So this is the 5th and final game that I played against Emory Tate back in 2007. Clock beta. I'm sorry, you guys. We get oh, did we get a raid? Thanks so much to Chessburger TV for the raid 137. Can I drive to New York now and show you guys? Yeah, 21 hour live stream as I drive back. Yeah. Knight f3 d5. No, I realize I know exactly where it is, and I know why I thought it was here too. So we get d5 d3. I play g6 here. Let me stop the music so you guys can hear. So I played g6. Now we get We get g3, bishop g7. Emory plays bishop g2. Now I go pawn to e6, and here he plays this very strange move, bishop g5. So I go knight to e7. Now the reason this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense is because normally you want to line up a pin, but in this case I just go here and I can kick the bishop out with h6 next move. So we get knight c3. I play h6. Emory goes bishop to f4 here, and now I play the move pawn to c5, trying to build a big black center. We get bishop to e5, another dubious move by Emory. I suspect at this point he's just trying to play something a little bit different, but he should have played something like e4 castles, because after bishop e5 f6 he has to take, and now I have the bishop pair, I have big black center, and everything here is really nice for black. We get e4, d4, knight to e2, and now I play e5, creating the classic connect 4, almost a pyramid as well if I can get b6. Castles is played, and now I castle. We get pawn to c3. I go bishop to e6, just putting the bishop on a nice square where it targets a2. I can also go queen d7 and bishop h3 later on. We get pawn takes pawn. I take back with a c pawn. Knight to d2 is played, and now I play the move queen to b6, targeting the pawn on b2. What was the moment in the game? So in the game, I believe the moment, so b3 is played. I believe the moment in the video is right around, I think it's this position after c5. If I go back here, oh no, it's not. It's right before I play c5. Actually, it's right before I play c5. If we look at this closely, it's the pawn's on c7 here. This is after h6 bishop f4. It looks like I'm thinking here before playing pawn to c5, if I'm not mistaken. That's what it looks like. So all right, back to the game. Let me change the scene, of course. Back to the game here. So like I said, we have this position after e5, castle c3, bishop e6, takes. He goes knight to d2. Now I play queen b6, b3. I play queen to a6, targeting the pawn on d3. And here black is just much better, much more space in the center, an open file that you can control on the c file, and the bishop pair as well. So now we get queen to b1, play pawn to b5 here. Very simple move, just stopping the knight from coming to c4 here. And again, I want to infiltrate and stack on the c file. So we get pawn to f4. When did DGT become a big thing in top pairs? You mean like digital clocks? Is that what you mean? We'll get to that after the recap. So f4, bishop f7 is played here. Get pawn takes pawn. Now I take back. One big problem with this again is that one of the things you have to know is that when you have the B's, diagonals might be closed for a while, but eventually if they open up, the bishops are going to have a lot more scope. And long term, after trading here, I can go like h5, bishop h6, and take this long diagonal towards c1. So bishop h3 is played by Emory. Now I play the move queen d6, pawn to a3. I go a5. Don't know if this is the best move. Again, as you could see from the game, this was a quicker game, so this was not classical. We were playing the 3-day schedule, so we're playing 5 games in one day of game 30. So after a5, rook a2 is played by Emory. Now I go h5. Idea to play bishop h6 and take this diagonal. Again, the B's are starting to look very strong. The f7 bishop is very good, targeting b3 and a2. I get the bishop on h6, targeting the long diagonal towards c1. So now we get pawn to a4. So now I play knight to c6. He takes, I take back, and now we get the move knight to c4 here. And now I play queen to e7 in this position. Now again, black is just much better. I have bishop h6 to take this diagonal and maybe put the bishop on e3. I can also stack the rooks on b8 and b5 and go after this weakness on b3. So now knight c1 is played here by Emory. I go bishop h6, keeping an eye on the knight, also keeping an eye on the e3 square. Rook a to f2 is played by Emory, and now I find the very nice move bishop to e3, creating a pin with the bishop towards the rook and the king. So now Emory has to take the bishop, even though he doesn't want to. But the problem is when he takes, now this also creates a great bastion. My knight is jumping to d4 immediately, and it's probably already lost for white. So we get rook f3. I go knight d4, chucking the pawn. And after rook e3, I play queen to g5, putting pressure on this diagonal. I also have h4, targeting the pawn on g3. So here Emory plays rook e1. Now I go queen to d2. Emory plays king to h1, and now I play this very nasty move pawn to a4. The reason that white can't play rook to d1 here is then I go knight f3 check. If king h1, you get mated, and if you take the knight, then you lose the rook on d1. So he plays king h1. Now I go pawn to a4. Rook d1 is played. I go queen to b4, and the idea is very simple. My king side is actually very safe here. I can always go king g7, and if I get this past b pawn, it's going to be too much to deal with. Additionally, you look at the knights. Great knight on d4, this knight on c1 really not doing anything here. So I've got a great knight, I'm getting a passed pawn, and my king side is relatively safe, so it should just be winning. Emory plays queen b2. Now I take with the pawn, of course, because now he wants to go like queen f2 and try to do something fast. It just doesn't work, so I have b2 b1. and after knight e2 I go knight takes knight, queen takes, and I just go b2 anyway. And this passed pawn really strong on b2. He has to go queen c2, go queen c5, queen d2, and now I play the very nasty move bishop to a2, which ends the game because I'm threatening to make a queen. And if white trades on f8, I can capture with the queen, not the king, because after king takes queen h6, white is actually able to save the game. But I can just take with the queen here, and again I'm just going to make the queen with the pawn, push to b1, and end the game. So Emory tries queen h6 here, last gasp sort of desperation attempt. If I were to queen here, for example, white is actually winning somehow. I'm not sure how, but I guess after king h8 there's check and just rook b1, and if I take with the bishop there's a mate. If I take with the rook here, for example, white can play rook takes rook, not rook c1 of course, and again same problem with bishop e6. So I don't want to do that, so I just go rook b6, very calmly guarding the pawn. There's no bishop e6 because I take with the rook and I still guard. And so here I'm just guarding with the rook, I'm still threatening to make a queen, and my queen on c5 can simply capture on f8. So this is just very good. So you get pawn to d4 being played by Emory, sort of desperation. I just take, he plays bishop f5 here, and now I just take queen g5, king h7, and queen takes h5 doesn't work because I could just go rook h6. King guards the rook, rook is guarding f5. I'm going to make a queen and end the game. So here we get rook takes f5. Now I take back, Emory takes with the pawn, I play b1 equals queen, and here Emory resigns the game. If he takes on h5 again, rook h6 is good. There's no queen f7 check because I can just capture with the bishop on the backwards diagonal. And if he takes on b1, for example, I mean many ways to win, but even just taking with check is good enough, or queen d5. So many different ways to create a checkmate. So this was the fifth and final game that Emory and I played. This was at the World Open in 2007. As you can tell from the rating progression, you can see like Emory's rating was roughly about the same during this whole period, whereas my rating, obviously it started quite low and it just, I mean, I just gapped up. This is a USCF rating, by the way. When I put 2739 whenever I saved this game, this was not my FIDE at the time. But again, you can see sort of the differential. And actually, out of all the games, this last game was probably the cleanest game. This was the game that was cleanest, where it just seemed like I outplayed him from start to finish. And again, you can tell like in the early games it was quite competitive. Even though I did win the majority of the games, it was quite competitive. But by the end of this game, was sort of, I just pushed him off the board in this final game in 2007. So this was the fifth and final game. Now I scored 4.5 out of 5 lifetime against Emory Tate. Very strong player. Obviously played during a time when there was not a lot of money in the game, and I mean he certainly struggled at times, but obviously someone that, you know, I enjoyed playing against. It was fun playing him. So I did want to show these games for sort of two reasons. First of all, obviously his son Andrew is very much in the news. He did pass on a couple of years ago. I mean, I don't know, nowadays time seems to go so fast that it might have been more than a few years ago, but let me check. It was, oh wow, it's 2015. It was already 7 years ago. That's just crazy. But yeah, that's insane. So it was 7 years ago they passed on. Obviously his son is in the news a lot these days, which is a large part of why I'm doing it. But also the other reason is because these are games from my personal database. These are games that do not exist anywhere else. So just for historical purposes, it's good to also put them out there so that people can see these games. Because if you look for my games against Emory, maybe one of these games is somewhere, but these games just don't exist. They're lost in the sands of time forever if I don't show them to you guys. So that's why. How are the games on your personal database? Because when I was younger, you guys, from the time that I started playing the game, I saved a lot of games. I would write down the games, of course, score sheets, and I would enter them in ChessBase manually. You use the computer, look at variations, and that was analysis. In the late 90s, early 2000s, that's how you analyze chess, you guys. You didn't have these online databases. You didn't have chess.com. You would go, you'd save your score sheets, you'd enter the game manually into ChessBase, and that's how you would analyze. That's how you would do it, you guys. It's not on chess games. No way who would do that. Waste of time. Yeah, I mean, I know like my stepfather, for example, he has games from like the 1980s and 1990s that he really regrets not saving the score sheets of those games because they're just gone. They're just gone forever.